And I'm gonna be high.
Good on you, Donald. I'm the Rocket Man, yeah.
I'm a rocket man. And I'm gonna be
Rocket Man.
I'm a rocket man.
Go to the moon.
What's new with you? How's business?
Dude, we grew year over year, right? Like
That's rare
that's what we
in this market.
Yeah. Dude, we are out there making stuff happen. You know, we're just building out every, you know, I mean, dude, you get it. It's like you got to create your own processes and you got to follow your own processes every single day. And then you got to make
Right.
those changes when you realize what's working and what's not working. And, you know, and then again, identifying where are the opportunities that are out there, because there are certain segments of this industry right now that it is extremely challenging to compete in as a broker and make money, i.e. full truckload drive-in reefer. It's very
one
challenging
one
to get
drop,
in there.
pretty difficult right now.
Yeah, so it's like what can you capitalize on? And you know, for us, it's a lot of the fringe shit, man. It's a lot of the stuff that most people don't want, the hot shots and the sprinter vans and, you know, drayage. Like, dude, we've been doing a shitload of drayage work, and
Hey,
yeah, and existing customers like, hey, can you help us out with this? And we're like, fuck it, why not, right? Because they were like, there was 200 opportunities that they had, and I'm like, yeah, we'll take a couple. And so we've been slowly doing that, and now we're doing probably between 75 and 100 containers a month now.
and that
So
was an
just
existing
them.
customer that you sold a bit deeper to?
Yeah, that was an existing customer that we were set up and we were moving full truckload with them. And they're like, hey, we're opening this transloading facility. What can you do here? And I'm like, it's been a while since I've done this. You know, so we just talked with them, and then they're like, all right, we'll give you 15 containers, start there. And we did 15 month one, then we did 30 month two, and then like 60 month three. And then it's been like between 75 and 100 every month since then.
3, 4, 5 a day, just popping them out.
Yeah, dude, and that's what it is it's and now we're comfortable enough to where we're like actively cold calling shippers and asking them about that. And because it's a pain in the ass, man. Like it is. It's easy if you're organized. It, you know, because it's like there's no variables with them, right? Where it's like, hey, the container got offloaded today, you have 4 days to get it out of the port, and once it's out of the port, you have 4 days to get it back to the port. Otherwise, there's fees. So it's very cut and dry. But it's, I mean, just like anything, man, you just do it a few times, you get the process down, and then you just duplicate it.
Yeah, we just started shipping for a new customer that's shipping bridges. And so it's just like 15-foot wide segments on a flatbed that's 54 feet long. It's just crazy stuff. But they needed somebody who could actually execute it with escorts, and we can. And so we've been doing that. But I think that, you know, if you think about this market, there's still, they always say riches in the niches, but really only if you're good at the niches. That's my phrase. It's like, oh, riches in the niches. And people look for like a niche. And I'm like, well, niches are there for a reason. You have to be excellent at it. So if you want to go into drayage, you have to be able to perform. You can't just say, well, let's do drayage because others won't. You have to be good at it. But yeah, I digress. So ladies and gentlemen, another episode of Let's Talk Logistics. We've got Chris Jolly. He does not need an introduction on LinkedIn, on podcasting. He is the founding father of podcasting and live shows on LinkedIn. And I'm blessed that he decided to take the opportunity to come on my show. Chris, how's the day?
Dude, Gabe, hey, thank you for having me come on. It's the least I can do because you've been on my show multiple times at this point. And when you said you were doing this, I'm like, yes, 100%. Let's join. Let's make it happen. And you know, today's going good. It's, you know, good is such a relative statement sometimes because it's one of those like I got all my critical tasks done for the day, and I look at that as that's a win. You know, because it's very contrary to what you see out there on the internet and everything else, man. It's a lot of work. It's a lot to go in. But most importantly, it's a lot to hold yourself accountable when things aren't going your way, right? Like because ironically, you don't just add shippers every single day just because you cold called them, right? Like it's a lot of no, there's a lot of rejection. And, you know, you got to look for like, where's the progress points as you're building stuff out.
Yeah, I think I talk about this a lot with my team. When I was a sales rep, it was all about momentum, and you'd have like really good months and your pipeline would be great. And then a bunch would fall out the end of it. You'd feel good. And then you'd have your dry spells. When you're running a business, it's the same thing, another order of magnitude higher. So when you don't have momentum, you have to push even harder to get it the stone up the hill. But if you just get your stuff done every day, contrary, like you said, to what's on social media, you actually have to run a business and do all of the blocking and tackling of doing that and manage a pipeline and manage a media show. So I'm going to start with this. Why do you have an American flag as your background?
Because it's the greatest nation on earth, and I feel like everybody should proudly fly it behind them. And, it was, dude, I put it in my office when I bought my first home. That was the first thing I hung. Outside of it was the American flag, and all of my apparel for my company all has the American flag on it because, like, dude, I couldn't do this in any other country. I couldn't create two businesses that have grown exponentially over 40 some months in any other country but this. Exactly. So the fact that people don't fly it in their, like, I think that's extremely disrespectful. That's my personal opinion. You should have it up everywhere.
Amen. So we have a little bit of I don't want to get too political, but we've had an election. We have a different vibe right now. The UFC fights, John Jones is doing the Trump dance. All of these different things are going on. But I do think if you remove Trump and you remove Biden from the equation, it was more like, hey, where's America going to go? Big government or small? And if you're listening to this podcast, you're likely in freight or you're a small business owner. We want small government. And so I'm pretty excited about those results, regardless of the social issues, although I agree with most of them anyways. But if you just strip all that down, big government or small government and lower taxes is better for entrepreneurs and better for small businesses. And that's the freight industry. That's a lot of small brokerages, and they build it off of nothing, and they don't have access to capital, and they go and make it profitable. Take me into, a little bit of your mindset of why. I won't go all the way into your backstory because I like to talk about what's going on right now in the industry and take some hot takes on that. But for some context, who is Chris Jolly? Why did you start Freight Coach Media or the Freight Coach Show?
Yeah, I mean, out of necessity, I had no other options. I was, it was the beginning of the pandemic and I was out of a job. And, I had resigned from my job in March of 2020 because I had this grand idea to go out and learn the trucking company side of things. And I resigned, and then that thing called COVID became a thing, and all of my opportunities went away, and I'm way too proud to go and ask for my job back. So I'm like, well, fuck, what am I going to do? And I am a man of faith. If you listen to my show and you hear me swear as much as I do, it might come as a surprise, but I am a man of faith, and I'd been praying to God for a very long time. I want to be my own boss. I want to do my own thing. And, after about 30 days of kind of seeing what was out there on social media, I'm just like, I'm going to start my own thing. And I started doing sales training. I was a sales consultant inside of transportation. That's all. I wasn't like a general sales trainer. I was just training freight brokerages and trucking companies because nobody was hiring. But I'm like, how do I leverage my experience? Yeah. So I started doing that, and I did that for a few years. And I started my podcast as a way to market my services. And I took the approach of like, I just want to talk about the realities of the industry. I don't want to talk about this pie in the sky, because like social media, like again, is full of so much garbage. It is to this day. It was back in 2020, and I'm like, I just want to talk about freight. I love freight. I love the industry. I want to talk about people's stories, but most importantly, I want to put education together by transportation professionals for transportation professionals that people can go in and lean into and listen, and not think that they have to sign up for something. And I wanted to create that as a way, again, just to like give back, right? Because we all have unique experiences in the industry. True. And not everybody has millions of dollars to spend on stuff. So how do we leverage social media for the better? So that's why I started the podcast and doing that. And then after a couple of years, I got the itch to get back in it, because like I love that my clients were getting success. I absolutely loved it. But I'm like, man, they're literally just doing what I'm telling them. Why don't I just go out there and do it? And in natural Chris Jolly fashion, it was at the bottom of the market. Nobody was adding anybody, and I went in. I had no existing customers. That from a shipping perspective, I had no book of business, and SPI Logistics was advertising on my show, and I came to them and I'm like, hey, this is what I want to do. I don't have a book of business. Would you guys take a shot on me? And they're like, 1,000%. Yes, we will take a shot on you.
Smart
And
move.
yeah, so yeah, we've been doing that now for 20 some months. I don't know, yeah, 26 months, I would say. Like, I say December or January 1st of 2023 is when we like actually started. We technically filed everything in October of 2022, but we didn't have a plan. We were just like, what are we going to do? Yada, yada, yada. And then January 1st is when we really started. And, you know, we've grown year over year. My business partner might get upset by me saying this, but I don't care. We just crossed $1 million in revenue in 20 some months of all cold business, all business that was brought on through that.
That's a good baseline,
So,
man.
yeah, and so we hit that, and that's a big monument, I think, in business is to hit that million in revenue mark. And so it's like to say that, and especially in 24 months or whatever it's been.
And it's not 2021, 2022 right now. That would have just been like 5 loads because it was such a high rate. But you got to actually, one, you have to scrape to get rates and make profit. It's a very difficult industry. And right now. And then two, no one's hungry for adding a bunch of brokers. So you have to actually provide value above and beyond to replace. But if you're optimistic like Chris Jolly, I know you are, you might have started at just the right time, because those who started in 21, 22 thought it was really easy to do this business thing and to run a truckload brokerage and to have employees and really just grow at will. And 2023 was a wake-up call for a lot of them. And I know there hasn't been as many publicized bankruptcies, but there's been a lot of quiet, just they're done. And now they have a job somewhere else. And you can see that. If I segue a bit, you can see that on social media, but you talked about, you started a social media company, really. I mean, you were a podcast, but you're a sales consultant. You had built a book of business in freight. You were successful at it. You're good at it. You're using your skills and saying, hey, I can teach your brokerage how to do what I did. And then you had this podcast that kind of, in my words, kind of blew up, right? A lot of people watched it. A lot of people know who you are because of it. And you go to all the conferences and you're kind of the guy. But would you say from 2020 to now that LinkedIn has gotten more crowded with people who say that they're experts and never actually have moved a load in their life? Or would you say it's gotten better?
I think it's gotten way worse, if I'm being honest with you.
Okay.
I
At least
feel
we agree.
like,
We could have debated, but we're on the same page.
Yeah. No, I just, I feel like there's a lot of individuals that are out there that are posting about, I'm never going to knock anybody's hustle. I'm a capitalist at heart. I think, social media is a beautiful thing. You can go out there in today's day and age, but eventually you're going to get got. Like if you're not who you say you are, it's going to come to light. And I just, and another big driving force behind why I got back into it as well is I was sick and tired of all these formers talking about the industry. I was X this. Yeah. This is how I was successful in freight, and you should do it this way. Well, if it works so well, why aren't you still fucking doing it? And I was just like, well, screw it. I'm going to put all my fucking chips on the table. All right. The freight coach, the brand, everything is going to go out and build a fucking successful company in front of everybody's eyes. And I'm going to practice what I preach on my show, because nothing about what I'm doing in my business is different from what I talk about on my podcast. So I'm just going to literally put it all on the table and build it up. And, because it is, man, again, it's back to what it was back in 2020 as well. I don't learn from people that aren't actually doing it, right? Like when I seek mentorship, for example, I'm not going to seek mentorship from a consultant who never built a business. If you were a consultant now and you sold your company and you have verifiable, like the Dan Martells of the world, and there's a bunch of people out there who are doing it who have like a verifiable track record of like $100 million exits, now working with entrepreneurs to try and help them. Boom, done.
Yeah.
The people that I learned from, like I need to learn from somebody who's actually walked the walk, right?
Yeah.
And I can't learn from somebody that isn't doing it. I just can't do it. It's just my personal thing.
One of the big reasons I started Let's Talk Logistics is because I'm building rocket shipping. I'm building an LTL and truckload brokerage right now and a TMS company. We do a lot of stuff, but I'm in year 4, going on year 5, and I'm actually building it. And I was struggling throughout the last couple of years, and we're growing really quickly. And we've had year over year growth where I have a really nice company. I like to say that, but there was nobody out there posting any content that had actually done it or was doing it. And there's a couple, and I won't name names. There's a couple who have done it and have exited in some way or shape or form. And they're doing podcasts or they're posting, but I'm kind of like, well, why didn't you do that or say anything while you were building it? And why did you stop doing it? And then I see at least 90% of the folks on LinkedIn, I got sick of it, of 90% of the people on LinkedIn posting about freight and doing the media and freight had never actually done it, or they had done it and failed at it and bounced from company to company. And they were making money talking about best practices and speculating on markets and talking about sales. And I'm like, wait a minute. Those people don't do it. And so my goal was to bring on people who are doing it. And that's kind of like a scope I have, is I'm not going to bring on people who have built a business. I'm only going to interview people who are building a business. So I was glad that you chose to come on, because you're building it out in the open more than anybody I know.
I love that. And, because like when we were talking on the phone a couple of weeks back, that's what it was. And, because it's like another thing too, selfishly with a lot of this content, I want to remember where my mindset was at certain stages of my business, because, and like, it's not always going to be cash strap, please let my receivables come in so I can pay my fucking mortgage. It's not always going to be that way, but I don't ever want to forget that. And I want to be able to go back in time and go back to those moments and be like, damn, why were you thinking this? If you only would have looked at it like this. And, and then, also like, I want to I want future family members and everything else to be able to know like what kind of guy I was. And this is more of like a realization here recently, because like I didn't know either of my grandfathers. Both of my grandfathers died before I was born. And I don't feel like I got the experience of them, even through secondhand stories, where now like future generations are gonna be like, dude, that guy was a fucking wild card. Look at him go. And, so it's like, it's just another thing where I want to kind of document all of that stuff and document the journey and show a realistic timeline of growth. But yeah, I want that documented journey of year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up, because it's like everybody's an overnight success now, right? But it's like you said, very rarely do you document from day one, $1, and go all the way up.
Yeah, I listened to a few different podcasts. Andy Frisella, I know we have in common. Alex Hormozzi talks about that exact mindset of, documenting. Bezos and Musk never did it, so he wants to. And I'm obviously not aiming for that same target, but things happen so fast in business that like the craziest stories that I'll ever hear and experience have already happened to me. And I didn't document them over the last 3-4 years. And I'm like, how did that story go down? Or somebody, one of the VPs or one of the directors will say a story. And I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen. I remember that in Houston with that customer when they didn't show it. And I'd rather have it documented. So we're starting more of like a This Week at Rocket recording, and it's more internal, but I like that mindset of being able to know where you were at as you go. And I'm like, 2 years ahead as far as length of business for the brokerage. And we're not at the point where I have to be like, man, I got to pay my bills, but we're also not a $1 billion brand. Yeah. But I do remember a year and a half ago in 2023 when it had just started and how hard that was. And we'd lost a big customer and the freight market had tanked, and I had some bad business partners and I had to part ways with all of that. That was a stressful time. I didn't document it. So I agree with that sentiment. Do you think, Jolly, that do you think in the next year, people speculate about the industry a lot, right? And so pretty much some companies make a living off of speculating on it, but they're at least news organizations. But still, a lot of people pontificate on it. Do you think that you guys will be set up well for the next year if it does grow? Like you'll have that right baseline in place?
Yes, because we have a plan that we're executing upon. We have a proven track record that it works, right? Like we're actually doing the work every single day, right? Like you could pull my cell phone records because I make all my cold calls from my cell phone. You know what I mean? And we have that system, you know, because like, dude, it takes time to iron out a lot of those things. And especially when you work with somebody else, you got to find a way to work together internally, really, before you can find out how to work externally. And, you know, so it's taking that. So I think we are primed for growth because like, we're not just going to start selling now because like, oh, hey, the market might get better, which I don't think it's going to in the next 12 months, not as much as people are speculating.
There's optimism in the air, but I think that's optimism, maybe delusional optimism. We'll see.
Yeah, I had optimism to not be an alcoholic, obese piece of shit for a long time, man. But until I actually started working on it, it was still my fucking reality, right? Yeah. So it's like, you need to actually work for that, right? So it's like, I feel like the people who have not stop selling through the down cycle from a freight volumes and an opportunities perspectives, they're going to come out the gate sprinting because they've been on all offense. They haven't been sitting back playing defense like, oh, I don't want to dip my toes in the water and put myself out there because like, again, you're not going to just miraculously have a good business because the market improves. You're not going to miraculously just start selling again because you think it's going to be easy out there. So from that perspective, we're not going to operate any differently than what we are right now because like we do the work every single day.
Yeah. And I think that part of when I look at I don't run Rocket based off of macroeconomics because you just can't do that. You have to live in the micro and just control what you can. But a lot of the larger brokerages and a lot of the larger LTL managed trans companies have reduced headcount year over year over year as they've kind of shrunk. Even though they may have grown revenue, they definitely had a strategic headcount reduction, mostly because they're VC. And that was just an initiative. But that was their main advantage over companies like mine, was that they had more people and they could just have more activity. And so if it does recover or if it doesn't, they lost their advantage. And the LTL rates have kind of normalized between, it doesn't matter how big you are, if you're $1 billion or 100 million, you're going to get good LTL rates if you meet that barrier. So I'm very optimistic or bullish. I kind of hope it stays lower for longer because it's a good thing for, you know, a scrappy company that's bootstrapped to be able to grow into. I think I want to pull on one thread that you talked about, and you don't have to share this. You can say, hey, pass, and we'll just cut this out. But you said, I think your exact words were an alcoholic fat piece of shit, but I don't know if that was exactly.
That was verbatim.
So
that is correct.
Take me back to Chris Jolly. I see you. I've only known you as this highly motivated, clean cut dude in shape. Yeah. Wears the orange, has the hat. America, says a lot of F words, but a great dude. And take me back to when you weren't there and what shifted.
Dude, I mean, there are, ever since I had my first drink when I was like 13, and I really started drinking when I was like 16, and it was more of like, you know, once a month, maybe going out, and, you know, being from northern Wisconsin, it's kind of the norm, and you know, you're around that culture a lot. Yeah, dude, and it was I just got into it, and then I just essentially developed into a high functioning alcoholic is really what it boiled down to. Cause like I never missed work. I never went on benders where like I just went MIA for days. I didn't get in fights. I never got arrested. I never got a DWI. I just enjoyed drinking. And I did it because, I mean, essentially I just wasn't going after what I knew I was capable of in life. And I was just fucking scared. I was scared of my own shadow. And it was a big awakening when I started working for myself. I knew at that time, I knew myself, and I'm like, all right, you know, again, back to the Andy Frisella podcast of the world. And I was listening to him and I had heard something on there. And then I knew that if I looked at myself in the mirror, and I was like, I got to stop blaming other people for why my life is in shambles. You know, like, thank God. And I tell my wife this all the time. Thank God she didn't fucking leave me, because
I feel that,
you know, like I tell her this all the time, man. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for supporting me through this, because I go back and I look at the photos of myself and I see the drunk pain on my face. And it was just, I woke up one day and I'm like, all right, if I'm going to do this business thing, back in 2020, I looked at myself in the mirror. I'm like, I can't drink because the highs are going to be high. I'm going to want to have if I'm going to have a good day, I'm going to drink. If I'm going to have a bad day, I'm going to drink. And I'm like, I can't do that. And I was like, I just gotta get back into shape. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm just going to start moving. And I just legitimately, I bought a food scale. And I'm like, I don't even know why I'm weighing out my food, but it seems like everybody else online is doing it. So I'm going to start weighing out my food. And I just started working out. I started moving, and I went a year without drinking any alcohol at all. And like, I went from complete alcoholic to no drinking for 12 months without any relapses. And then I started drinking again.
Chris. That's incredible.
I know. That's just my fucking mindset with stuff. The beauty of being an addict, Gabe, because that's what it is, man. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. You can channel this shit into certain things. Yeah. And I chose to be addicted to bettering myself. And I knew that nobody was going to come and do this for me. I accepted that. Like, hey, if I want my life to improve, I have to improve. Right. And I don't just like, I live this 24/7, 365 now. Because like I'm starting to just now, I feel like, 4.5 years into this journey, almost 5 years in, like, holy shit, I am fucking an absolute sniper of an individual that if I can lock in and channel that stuff towards it. And, so it's like the hardest part to me was admitting to myself that, like, dude, you're the fucking problem, and if you want to change, you got to change. And it's a thing that, dude, I work on this every single day. Right. So it's like, I built a system around my life. I found some stuff that worked, and I'm sticking with it. And, again, back to my faith in God, I was blessed with an autoimmune disease that in 2022, I was almost hospitalized for some stuff. And after some testing and everything, because I've had back issues for a very long time, and I thought it was just bulge discs and sciatica and all this stuff. And then after some weight loss and then it got really bad. I thought I was going to need to be hospitalized. And then I got a bunch of blood work done and everything. They're like, we found it. You have an autoimmune disease. It's called ankylosing spondylitis. So it's like my spine. Yeah. So my spine actually can start fusing together and shit. And so, and it was because the doctor told me at that moment, and this was in, fast forward to March of 2023, the doctor said at that time, he's like, listen, you probably should never drink alcohol ever again because it's an inflammatory. And they're like, you got to keep your inflammation at an all-time low in your body to really work with this. And I had, in January of 2023, had decided, all right, I'm done drinking for good now. Like, I had kind of sprinkled it in there. So then that happens in March. I'm like, oh, damn. And then to add it in, they're like, you can only eat like 5 things now, essentially, because like sugar of any kind causes inflammation. And I can feel that now, even in certain foods and everything. So like, I had to clean up my diet. I had to remove a bunch of shit. And again, that's why I say God bless me with it, because I would have never taken my health and sobriety seriously unless this happened. Because now I'm like, all right, I can't eat that shit now, because if I do, my body flares up. And I know it does, because like, it's a trial and error phase with a lot of this on, and what's in what. So yeah, man, that's what it is. And when, and again, it's that little daily progress and stuff that comes along with that. So in a long-winded answer, there it is.
I love that story, Chris. I think a lot of people, including myself, most entrepreneurs are ambitious, and ambition can be a very positive thing and can also get the best of us. Do you look at building your businesses to revolutionize the industry, or do you look at it to take care of your family? And is it somewhere in the middle? What's your main priority?
It's a hybrid. I want to ultimately build the largest transportation company in North American history that changes the industry for the better. but I also want to build. I want to be able to look back one day, Gabe, and be like, damn, I fucking built the absolute best company that I could, and I left it all on the table.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what that is going to equate to, if it is going to be the largest company in North American history, or if it's going to be very successful and I'm going to be able to look back and say the second part. And I'd be happy with either one.
Yeah.
You know, because ultimately I want to maximize what I can do. I want to keep pushing that limit. And I think it'll kind of go hand in hand with it. You know, because if I build the best company that I possibly can, that's going to be a success.
Yeah. Well, I think that to follow that up, I haven't asked anybody this question yet, but do you build in your mind? Are you building for an exit, or are you building to build? You said the largest North American transportation company, so that doesn't sound like you're doing a build and sell model. So if they build and own and keep crushing it, that's what I hear from you. Is that accurate?
Well, 100%, man. Well, I mean, I don't have an exit. Like, I don't want to retire.
Gosh, I love to hear it. I love to hear it.
Dude, I literally am like doing what I love, and like I'm building my dream. Like, why would I want to get out of doing this? And then, Frank, what am I going to do? Like, I can't work for anybody.
Just have to start another company. And so I hate to cut you off, but like this really, I'm glad you answered it that way. I don't meet many people like you. I think that I shit on venture capital all the time, but it has its uses in tech, maybe not freight. And I think there's some clear examples of it not working in freight. But I think that the problem with it is actually the mindset that you should always be building your company to sell it. And that the only way to be successful as an entrepreneur is to build something and exit. And there's several entrepreneurs in our space who have built and exited, and they're the golden boys of the industry because they sold a business. And I don't want to hand my business down to my children, but that's only because I've seen that happen, and it causes very difficult family circumstances. I have 3 kids. Who gets it? It causes a lot of consternation, but I never started rocket shipping, and I'm 4 years in and going on 5, and it's a valuable company, and we have a very nice EBITDA, and we have valuations. I have never considered selling it because what else would I do? I'm 30. Do I want to I don't want to retire, but also I'm not a serial entrepreneur. I want to build something meaningful, and it's like an asset, right? I want to build a company that impacts people and then continues to go, and I'm pretty good at it, and so I'm going to keep doing it. But with that mindset, I think that part of the industry, maybe 90% of it, sees that as like not a success. It's not going to make the FreightWaves top 50 companies or FreightWaves top 25 freight tech companies because it's not a build and sell. Yeah. And I think that part of this shift over the last 4 years and in the new administration and small government versus big, it all goes towards, hey, what if we just built businesses that were profitable, employed people for the long term, and built something that was, an asset and valuable? And I do anticipate, and I am aiming to make Rocket one of the biggest brokerages and TMS companies in the space.
Hell yeah.
But I think the mindset of being okay with it being here for another 20 years and running it instead of trying to build it to sell, it has downstream effects that are much better for an actual business. We don't build stuff for our customers unless they ask for it. We don't build shiny tools just because it might be a cool feature. We don't buy lanes to be able to buy revenue for next year. I just had an RFP discussion with one of our largest shippers, and they wanted to contract lanes for next year. And in our technology, we can use other brokerages or ours, and we kind of, pick and choose. And we play in the spot market. They wanted us to contract. We submitted rates. We got beat by 10%. And they said, do you want to lower them? And I said, no, because the market is going to go higher than the all-time low of 19 months. And I don't really want to deal with losing money just to get a lane. And they asked me to explain. I said, well, most of the industry will buy that lane hoping they'll get more business from you, or hoping that they get revenue and it meets their metrics and they can raise their Series B or C. That's not Rocket. And they were so refreshing. They're going to give us part of that business anyways at a 10% increase because they know that we're going to be able to cover it. But on that theme, Chris, and I'll stop talking now, but on that theme, how important to you, that's your goal, is to build the largest North American transportation brokerage and impact the industry. Along the way, what does success look like for you?
Being able to be an example for others who have a similar background that I do, that I want them to be able to look at me and be like, if he can fucking do it, I can do it too. Like that, I want that to be, I want to, and again, like, and this is the beauty of like what you're building at Rocket and your podcast and what I'm doing here is I want people to see like, you got to work really fucking hard, but you can do this if you actually want, because I feel like some people, man, and especially if your goal is to exit, I want to touch on that a little bit. If your goal is to just exit, you're not going to mentally be able to tolerate what it actually takes to build a business, because then if your goal is money, I want to save so many people so much time. Go work for a company,
be a number 2 or a number 3, and you can make a lot of money.
Exactly. Make a couple $100,000 a year and go home at 5:00. All right. Because like, just do that. Your life is going to be so much better with that. Because if your goal is just to go in and exit within 3 to 5 years, I'm not saying you can't do it, but for what? Are you going to actually go through what it takes? Because like, you can't just raise money every time you fail. All right, like that.
And if that you can, did you create anything of value?
Yeah, and I think that ultimately, like, success for me is going to be able to look back over a certain time frame, Gabe, and be like, from a personal level, again, like these last couple of years, I'll say these last 4 years from a personal level, dude, I have been uber fucking successful because I went from 250 fucking pound alcoholic to 185 pound sober fucking jacked 38-year-old, in that time frame, right? So from a personal level, major fucking success. And that's dealing with a bunch of personal shit that I don't talk about on social media because I don't want fucking vanity metrics on my posts.
Yeah.
But, just overcoming those two things, like that's a major fucking win. And, again, I hope when people hear me talk about this, if they're in that situation, they're like, well, fuck, if Chris went from drinking every single day and he got his shit in line, I'm going to do that too. That's a win, man. Society wins with that when we elevate those standards. And then from building my business up, same thing. I want those people who hate school. I'm not against school, but,
Didn't you go to Harvard? Right?
Oh, yeah. massive Harvard guy. But the people who struggled in school, who maybe, struggled with the norm of society, that they're like, well, damn, if he can do it, I can do it. But I also want them to, to be able to go out and see, like, at least I try and be the best person I possibly can. And I fundamentally do it that way. Like, that's success to me. But then the most important piece of it all is my wife and my son are going to look at me as he was a phenomenal dad and he's a phenomenal husband. Everything else is irrelevant. Everybody else's opinion of me is fucking irrelevant, except for my wife and my son looking at me and like loving me and knowing that like I'm the best version of, and getting that best version of me.
Amen, dude. I love to hear that. I think that, the quote, I've seen it on social media a few times. Like, I've already accomplished the things that I said before would make me happy, whether it's making $100,000 a year or getting a house or having a wife and having kids. Most entrepreneurs, and I think you and I fit in the same bucket here, we enjoy building, right, in the process. But I really think that the industry, and freight particularly, but also technology and SaaS, the build and sell exit model has tainted the correct entrepreneurs from running companies, because it should be about, I have 3 kids, I got a wife. That's all that I have to take care of. And then I have 30 employees. Oh, I have to take care of them too. And so those are my only focuses. And it's for the long-term investment. I think that's better for the industry, but also I just think if you're building it for an exit, you're going to cut corners. And that might be a hot take, but I feel like everybody agrees with that. If you're just trying to build an exit, how could you have a good culture and the right people if you're building to leave in 3 years? How could you do that? They don't, it's an intersectionality that doesn't match. I love to hear that you have a wife and a kid, and that's your main priority, and that success looks like, being the best version of yourself. And I know we're getting pretty deep in this, and this is like real stuff, right? This is real life. But
No, it is because like I live in reality though, Gabe, right? Like
we all do,
social
yeah.
social media has completely inflated people's ability to just level, like it's completely okay to not have it all figured out. All right. I don't have it all figured out. I don't know what I'm doing 99% of the fucking time, man.
There's not a manual. I have searched on ChatGPT. There's not a manual.
Exactly. I am figuring out my life every single day. All right. Like there is no, like my plan is to fucking work. All right. Like that's my plan. I know what I need to do on top of it, but like I'm learning new levels of this every single day. Like I've never done this before. Right. Like I've never reached certain levels in business and I'm going to be constantly doing it. And that's why I believe in constant self-development and constant training and everything else, because like, dude, there's going to be a point when I hit 10 million and I'm going to be the CEO of a $10 million company. I've never been there before. So does that mean that I put my, until I am, right? So it's like, I think that the more reality that we put out there from a content perspective, like, hey, I'm in this for the long run. Like I'm doing this to build a legacy company that maybe can be passed down in my family, or maybe somebody can take over one day or whatever that is. Like, I think that that's great to put that stuff out there, because what you're going to do, you're going to attract other entrepreneurs who are like, damn, I'm in the same boat, man. I don't want to sell. I want to build this up. I want to build the best company I can, and I want to change the world and change my community, or whatever level you want to go to. Because, again, like I just feel like if you're looking to exit, I just feel like you're going to quit too soon. I really do. I feel like,
or you're going to not build a certain product because it will take too long to get to revenue, or not service the customer because it's not the right margin for your EBITDA or for your investors or for your valuation. And that's just not how I like to do it. I do think there's a guy, I'm sure you've seen him on LinkedIn. His name's Tim Hyman, but he talked about building your company to sell. And I do follow that principle, so that, because I think that's the best type of company. And like some of the principles is building my company to sell means that I don't do everything. I have really competent people and employees that do revenue and operations and customer success and account management and finance. The business is not dependent on me to exist. Now, it used to be 3 years ago, and 2 years ago it still was, and last year it still was, and today might be the first time I can ever say, hey, Rocket could exist and maintain for 5 more years without me. I don't know if it would grow the same way because I have a particular revenue skill set, but I'm building it that way so that I'm actually building a business, not a job. But I don't anticipate selling, and someone would have to really twist my arm to say, hey, I'm going to offer you 5 years worth of value right now. And then the risk to reward ratio of like what's going to happen in the market, all those things. I'm going to pivot a little bit here from, the buy sell model versus freight. Do you think that I kind of see this? So in the truckload market and the LTL market, they're obviously opposite. It's very weird. LTL is taking general rate increases of 5%. Old Dominion just released theirs. General rate increase of 5% in 2024. And Yellow did not go bankrupt this year. So that doesn't make any sense to me, except for the fact that they can. And so they will. But we talk about AI and we talk about automating jobs and we talk about all that. But I think that the biggest bubble is going to be brokerages that add no value over each other, right? A bunch of small truckload brokers or LTL brokers that end up getting in the mix, and their margins will continue to compress. And my hot take is that they'll never recover to 20% margins again. There will never be another 2021, 2022 for the freight market as it sits because of technology, and it'll democratize the shipper's ability to get the same rate. And I don't think it's going to go to like a transaction model where it's all cost plus anytime soon. But I do think that people will what do they call it? Quiet quitting. And, if you say, hey, we got to come back to work 5 days a week, right? I think that's what's going to happen when the market recovers. People will just quit because it's so easy to cover a truck today. And they might not make much money on it, but at least they can cover their loads. And if people remember in 2021 winter, February 2022, it was pretty difficult to cover a load on spot. That's why the rates went up. There was 45 loads for 2 trucks, 450 loads for 10 trucks. I think that's when you'll see the bubble pop. Whereas most people thought it would be they'd go bankrupt. but they were able to get SBA economic disaster loans and PPP money, and they've stayed alive long enough, and they're in debt and they aren't paying their bills and all that. But it'll be when it actually gets hard to do the job again that will just deflate and people will exit the industry. What are your thoughts on that take?
God, it's almost like you watch my show, Gabe. I've been saying that now for I don't even know how long, but I truly feel the mass exodus in the industry is going to come from the brokerage side, because you see it. It's been easy for 4 years, right? It's been easy to cover loads. Pricing has been a little challenging here, but like it's still been easy to cover freight. And I think it's going to be a two-pronged approach. I think most people don't know or won't be able to handle when capacity tightens up and everything. But what it's going to be is shippers' tolerance for failure is going to continue to be extremely low. Yeah. So it's like and then they're going to blame you.
It'll approach zero over the next couple of years.
Yes. And I think that is where the mass exodus from the industry is going to be. I feel like it's going to be on the brokerage side because obviously the drivers are needed more than brokers. Let's call it what it is. Let's call a fucking spade a spade. Carriers are more needed in this transaction than the broker actually is.
Yeah, the brokers are providing a service. It depends on the market you're in, how valuable that service is.
And I think that the brokers who are just doing enough are going to be decimated by individuals like you and me and some other friends in the industry that actually know how to fucking do the job. It's only a matter of time. And that's what I tell people, man. It's only a matter of time before I cold call your customer. It's only a matter of time.
Especially if you're using a forum and ripping dials like rockets. So,
dude, it's only a matter of time before they give me an opportunity. And I will crush you in service and communication. I will crush you in that.
As soon as you get the chance, and it's only a matter of time until you get that chance.
Exactly, because that's the only way that I can show any real difference, right? Is when I'm actually moving their freight, because it's all the same bullshit in the prospecting phase. Yeah, it's all I guarantee, Gabe, if you fundamentally broke it down, we're saying the exact same thing, just maybe flipped around just a little bit. But ultimately, we're saying the same shit. And then the real differentiator, the real separator is going to be when we're actually working with our customers, because I walk the walk, right? Like, again, my customers will back me up when I say this, like good, bad, or indifferent. They know exactly what's going on. There are no surprises when they're working with me. All right. We just handle shit. And I think that people are going to have a very hard time adopting to that. I'm a broker. You do what I say. They're going to have a very hard time moving away from that.
Yeah. And I think that part of the reason I have that hypothesis is there's a bunch of people just sitting on their hands waiting for the market to recover. And FreightWaves has now called the freight recession over, and maybe it is. But as it recovers, it will be slow. And when it gets harder, they're like, then we'll make our fat rips again. But there will be two distinct differences. One, there isn't going to be, and I won't name company names, it's not fair, but there's over the last 4 years, there was a few truckload brokerages that built and then exited in 2020, 21, 22 that never made $1 of profit, but they had these interesting line of credit facilities, ABL lines, that you could borrow up to 90, 95, 100, 110% of the revenue for the month on a line and be able to run at a negative. All of those companies either sold or went bankrupt last year and a half. So those banks will not do that model again. But what that allowed was people to go after Anheuser-Busch and buy freight. But also in the mid-market, it trickled down to buying freight in the mid-market. That won't happen this next cycle. And then VC and PE were like, hey, let's pour money into brokerages that can get a 5 to 7x EBITDA in 3 years and flip them. They will come back into freight tech and they'll come back into the market and release some capital, but on a very tight leash on Series A, Series B. So you won't have that market pressure of like new entrants, the unicorns of the industry that were like, hey, we're going to go buy a bunch of lanes. You'll just have the big guys and then the small brokers who are going to do service. But because you don't have that, if you're working at one of those companies and you can't buy the freight, then you can't cover it. And if you can't cover it at a loss, then the job's really hard. And if the job's really
Yeah.
hard, then you probably quit, or you go somewhere else, or you say you're going to start your own and do it a different way. But I think this market recovery will be so good for companies like Freight Coach and Rocket and a bunch of other of our contemporaries. And I could name 10 of them. But that's my only take, is that the first bubble was that there was all this free money and people lost money on purpose to sell their companies. That won't happen again because the investors won't do that again. They know it won't be a viable path. And then it'll just be, TQL, CH, the big dogs, and then all the rest of us. And it'll just be open market competition. Who can cover better? Who can have customer service? And who can do a good rate? It's just business blocking and tackling.
Dude, and that's exactly it. And then, also what's going to happen on top of this is, and this is where the opportunities are going to really open up, Gabe, is a lot of these larger providers who have their hands in everything right now because they are 100% going for revenue. They need everything. What happens is when the InBevs of the worlds and all the large shippers increase in volume, they don't have time to pay attention to the smaller shippers anymore. So then
then they don't care, and it's always great for us.
Exactly, right? So I think that that's going to be a big thing. And again, like, this is why when that opportunity happens, and this is what I'm literally have my entire livelihood
staked
wrapped
on
up
this.
and staked on this happening, to where we will get in. And then when I get in, I mark my words, you're never getting your fucking business back, because I will service these small to mid-sized shippers at a level that they've never fucking experienced before. Whether I'm making $5 on the load, 500, or losing 500, they won't know the difference. They will receive the exact same level of service, communication, updates, everything. And trust me, like, when I say, like, this is how I provide for my family, and I will fucking do anything to make sure my family eats.
Yeah. All right, Jolly. To wrap up, I like to ask this question. You've done this for almost 5 years. I think it'll be March will be 5 years, or maybe April will be 5 years. What's one thing you would have done differently? Mistake you made that if someone's watching this and they're starting a business or they're running it and they're in year 2, they don't have to make the same mistake because they heard on Let's Talk Logistics that we made that mistake. What would it have been? And you don't even have to say what you have done differently, but what's one mistake you made that somebody else could avoid?
I'm going to say, like, I'm going to answer it, but I'm going to say, like, make a lot of mistakes, because it's the only way you'll ever really learn.
Yep.
Because, like, it's easy to sit up here and say, like, I wouldn't do anything. There's a lot of shit that in hindsight, I would love to have done differently, but I also now see the value in knowing what not to do. I think that's almost more valuable than knowing what to do, is knowing what not to do. But I will say this, one thing I would do differently is I would have a contract from day one. All right. If you work with anybody, pay an attorney, work with an attorney. When you know your service offering, whether it's consulting, media, anything, hire an attorney, have them put together a binding agreement, and then have everybody sign a contract. All right. I want to think everybody's good, but ultimately it will save you a lot of pain and headache along the way to have that from day one, and do that. That's one thing I would have done differently.
I like that. I can echo that. And I think that one way I could say that succinctly is almost every entrepreneur is wired a certain way to be overly optimistic and overly trusting of those around them, because they just assume they have the same goal and everybody has the same viewpoint as them. And like, they all just want success for the company. That is not true. And an entrepreneur that is in that frame, their best friend is a good attorney who is a skeptic of everything. And my wife has saved me many times from mistakes because she is more skeptical than I am. And I just see the best in people, and she sees life for what it is. And that's why I think God, and one of the reasons that God had me marry Mari is that she sees people for who they are and protects our family and our business. But that's really good advice, Jolly. I think that anybody could use that, whether they're in a business or not. But, I appreciate your time, guys.
Hell yeah.
Check him out on LinkedIn. He's got the best show on LinkedIn. He's probably the only person I know, besides me and a couple others, but the main guy who's building a business and doing LinkedIn posting. And most of the other people on LinkedIn, and people can hate on me for this, are really just consultants who haven't actually done this. And they talk about how to do it. And they have clickbait posts about a touchy topic to get a bunch of comments, but it's not valuable. If you want real value, listen to Chris's show, learn about the industry. And Chris, I hope that you keep crushing it. And next year when we check in, that you're at 10 million. So Appreciate it, man.
Hell yeah.
Have
dude.
a good day.
Absolutely. And I will say this. Thank you for having me on, but we need less consultants and more actual operators out there talking about what they're doing.
Hey, man, we got to cut it right there. That's the sound
Yeah.
bite.